Okay, so today what we're going to do is we are going to continue our look at our inference papers. We are going to be talking about... Okay, so we're going to continue our look at inference. Today what we're going to do is we're going to begin looking at the analysis section. Now this section is very straightforward if you will let it be. Do not try to do any more different kinds of analysis than the ones that we're going to discuss today. Okay? All right? And actually, you know what? We're not going to start with center. We're going to start with the Education Perfect exercise. I think they do a little better. And we're going to talk with something called spread. If you haven't written that down, just change center to spread. All right? Now, we're going to talk about what it means. We're going to talk about how to write about it. And we're going to talk about how to write about it effectively so that you have the least amount possible written and yet still contain the information that you need. Okay? So let's look at the lesson. Okay, change my mind again. We're going to look at shift first. All right? Now, you know the word shift. Shift just means you're moving something either to the right or to the what? Left. Now, we're going to have two sets of data that we're comparing. And so we're going to be talking about the shift in the data that's based on those box and whisker plots. In other words, where do they sit in relation to each other? Okay? So, anytime you're talking about shift, there are two main things you're going to talk about. You're going to talk about the median, and you're going to talk about the interquartile range. So, median shift and interquartile shift are the main ones you're going to talk about. Now, you could talk about minimums and maximums, but remember, those are just single pieces of data that are far away. They're not as meaningful to you as the median or the interquartile range. Both of those numbers are found by doing some math, right? So they're not just the end numbers. So you could find them that way, but it really doesn't make much difference. You're going to learn how to provide some evidence for your observations. I need to know that this is a meaningful shift because, right? You're going to relate those to the context. So in other words, I'm going to say that this means that 75% of the dogs in Auckland are bigger than the dogs in Wellington or whatever, right? Whatever you're comparing, you're going to put it into context. You must always think context or your paper is garbage. Right? And then you're going to discuss those in your report. In other words, they're going to show you examples of how to write about what it is you're seeing. Okay? All right. So let's just look through the lesson and we'll start talking about shift. Shift is very easy if you'll let it be. So what you're going to do is you're going to be comparing your two sample groups by looking at the shift when you have the box and whisker plots. So you see as this blue one moves, now it's shifting down, right? And as it goes the other direction, it's shifting up in relation to the purple one, yeah? Now they're not going to move on you. They're going to be stationary, but you're going to be able to see that they take different positions, okay? Now, if you want to talk about cleaning your data set, you can go back to that lesson. That's the last thing we looked at, cleaning your data set and looking at unusual points, right? My advice about cleaning your data set is don't if you don't have to. Just resample and see if you can get away from it. All right, here we go. So there are lots of things you could talk about when you're talking about shift. You could talk about minimums. You could talk about maximums. You could talk about medians. You could talk about interquartile range. You could talk about just about all kinds of things when you're dealing with that. So minimums, maximums, lower quartiles, upper quartiles, etc. But there are some of these that make more sense when you're making a comparison in a paper to talk about. And those, of course, are the median and the quartiles, the interquartile range. Okay? So let's talk about those. So these are the most important ones, the median shift and any quartile shifts. Now, I keep saying interquartile, but you're just talking about the quartiles themselves. How many quartiles of this one are further to the right? How many quartiles? So any quartile actually will work, not just the middle ones. So look at this one, for example, if you look at the medians of these two sets of data, here's the median of the purple one, here's the median of the blue one. What do you notice about the median of the blue one? It's shifted very far to the right, in comparison to the purple one. And I'll remember that this line is a quartile, is the boundary for a quartile. This is the upper quartile for this data set. What does that mean about how much data there is below this? How much data is there below that as a percentage? 75% at the upper quartile, isn't it? Remember, from the minimum to this thing, that's 25%, that's 25%, that's another 25%. So you could look at this median and you could say that the median of the blue set is greater than 75% of all of the data in the purple set. Okay? So what you're saying is that the median income for Wellington is above 75% of the incomes in Auckland, for example. Okay? So, in other words, that would tell you that the salaries in Wellington tend to be much higher, right? It's not true, but there you go. Just that example. All right. So, a quartile shift, you might want to write this down, occurs when a quartile from one sample is shifted relative to the corresponding quartile to the other in the sample group. So, let's just look at what, let me just explain that in a picture here. All right. So, here's the first quartile of the blue one, yes? Here's the first quartile for the purple one. Do you notice that the boundary for the first quartile of this one is well shifted to the right beyond the first quartile of the second one, isn't it? Of the purple, isn't it? Now, here is the second quartile. But if you compare these two where they overlap, sorry, my line's not very straight. The boundary for the first quartile here is well above the second quartile in the top one, isn't it? So that's what we mean by quartile shifts. The first quartile here is bigger than the first two quartiles here. Do you agree? Which means that 25% of this data is bigger than 50% of this data. Because each quartile has 25% in it, right? All right, do you see my comparisons there? 25% of this data is bigger than 50% of that data. Okay? What if I'm looking at this quartile? What is this quartile on the blue one? The very last one is called the third quartile? First quartile? How many quartiles are there? The fourth quartile, right? There's the first, the second, the third, and the fourth, right? So the fourth quartile here is bigger than the three quartiles in the purple one. Do you agree? It's really almost bigger than everything, isn't it? Okay. But so this third quartile is bigger than all of those, lands in the fourth quartile of the other. And we're going to talk about how to explain that so that it makes sense in your report. Okay? All I want you to see now is you're comparing these boundaries. So this is the first quartile, second, third, fourth, right? Remember they have funny names. This is the lower quartile. This is the median. This is the upper quartile. What's the boundary for the fourth one called? Max, the upper boundary. The lower boundary for the first one is called the min. Remember we looked at those? That's our 5 number summary. Those are the critical numbers that you must have. Okay? So you'll use that language, that statistical language when you're talking about these. All right. Now they're not always look like this, but you can see the shift. So here, if you look at this drawing, here's the lower quartile for the purple one, and you look at the lower quartile for the blue one is shifted to the right, so it's bigger, right? Here's the upper quartile for the purple one. The upper quartile for the blue one is shifted to the right, much bigger, isn't it? Okay? All right. And this kind of shift observation, these boundaries, lower quartile, median, and upper quartile, those shifts, those are called the quartile shifts. Those are one of the most important. The median is the other most important one. Mm-hmm. All right, and we're going to look at ways to describe this. So you can always look at it later if you want to. Okay? All right. So now, the other one that you cannot avoid talking about if you want to pass this paper is the median shift, where the medians are. So if you look here, and remember that when you're talking about median shift, you have to put it into context and you must support your statements with numbers. So here we go. We have mother's age by birth weight, so whether they smoked or didn't smoke, right? Or they had this is age and low birth weight. So here, if it was not a low birth weight, here's the median. I'll just draw a little line there. There's your median, right? Here's the median for the next one, for the other set. What do you notice about the median on the top one? It's higher, right? It's shifted to the right. Think about it in terms of shift. It's shifted to the right. And it's higher than the first, second, and what? Third quartiles, isn't it? So that's critical amount of data because that's 75% of the data down there, isn't it? So that is the kind of thing that you must mention. The median for the median age for the mothers who had no low birth weights is higher than 75% of those who did have low birth weight. So what that's basically telling you, what you can infer from that is that younger mothers tend to have lower weight babies, underweight babies. Yeah? So that's why it's so important. Now you can see how you can relate that back to your statement. Okay? So that's how you're going to be writing these things in your reports. All right. So look at the way they've written this. The median age for the non-birth weight mother is shifted to the right of the median mother's age for low birth weight. The median mother's age for non-low birth weight in this sample is 23, right? So they're giving you the actual data, the numbers to support it, and which is 5 greater than the median for low birth weight, which is 18. You must remember that this is a math class. You must include, if you mention something, some piece of data, you must give the corresponding number, right? So if you say median, you need to say what that median is, okay? Also, notice they made a numerical comparison to them. One of them was 5 units greater, okay, than the other. And you can always find those numbers in this summary statistics, those numbers that NZ Grapher is going to populate for you. Okay? All right. Now, remembering the percentages, we've talked about this a little bit already. Each quartile box contains 20% of the data points in that sample. So here you have, if this was 200 data points, then that means that this would be 50, that would be 50, that would be 50, that would be 50. Remember, that the bigger a box is doesn't mean it contains more. It just means those ones that it contains are more spread out, right? Every one of these boxes and whiskers, no matter how small or how long, contain exactly the same amount of information. This long whisker just tells me that between here and here, that those numbers are spread out, but there's still the same number of them. So don't get carried away and say there were more in the first quartile of the first one than in the first quartile of the second one. That's never true. Okay? It's going to contain exactly the same number. All right. Now, here's what I'm talking about, significant shift. And that's when you have 75% of one set of data is below 75% of the other set of data. That represents a significant shift. And that's when you can be fairly confident in your conclusion that this one is definitely different from this one. So it's the more shift you have, the more confident you can be in saying something. If there's very little shift, then you can't really say that there's a big difference. And again, we're going to look at how you'd write that up in just a moment. Okay? But do you see that 75% of this data is higher than 75% of that data? So it indicates that this one tends to be much higher than this one. Does that make sense? Much higher values. And 75% is kind of the threshold. Right? If you have 50%, half the stuff, you could say with some confidence, but really, to have really good confidence, you need more. And later you're going to see we're going to do another sampling technique called bootstrapping, which is going to bring it up to 95% confidence. Okay? All right. Now, quartile shift means that it actually goes beyond the other quartile. So if you look at these, right? So, I can stop this for you. So right now, if you look at this, at where this green circle is, okay, this line is beyond that line. That is a quartile shift. Okay? But if they're even close, oops, stopped it too far. But anyway, if they're even close, then there's no quartile shift. So you've got to make sure that one of them is further than the other in order to say that there is indeed a quartile shift. Okay? So do you see? All right, there it is. So this quartile is overlapping this quartile, right? So that's not a shift. You need a full shift. Okay. All right. So here's the breakdown. One of them is greater than four of them. Two of them is greater than three of them. Three of them are greater than two of them, etc. So you need a full shift across in order for it to be a quartile shift. Right? So which one of the plots below A or B shows a quartile shift between groups? Does A show a quartile shift between groups? So here's the first quartile. Is it bigger than? Here's the second one. Not bigger than the second one. Third one still overlaps. No. How about down here? Yeah, if you look, these three quartiles are bigger than two of these. Yes? Right? So be careful. You really have to be showing a real shift. So the first one doesn't, but the second one definitely has quartile shift. Doesn't have to be that big. All right? The next one, remember, you want to talk about any median shifts or any quartile shifts because it tells you how different the groups are. So here we go. We have two of them. When you're talking about the medians, you must give them numbers. Okay? Then when you're talking about, and this is upper quartile is the number right before the upper whisker, right? Remember, it's minimum, lower quartile, median, upper quartile, maximum. So upper quartile will be here, okay? And make sure you're answering the one for the right problem. And so if you're going to refer to any of these, put in the numbers. Okay? All right. Is there a quartile shift between these two sample groups in this population? Here's the first quartile. It's bigger than the first quartile there. So but that's only 1 to 1. Is 1 to 1 good enough? There's a quartile shift between these. The upper quartile of the data points in this group is shifted to the right of all the data points there. You see that? So yes, there is. So don't just look at the bottoms, look at the tops as well. Okay? Is there a quartile shift here? No. That was very definitive. There you go. There's not. So you see that none of these lines are all above one of the others. So the first quartiles are overlapping, the second quartiles are overlapping, the third quartiles are overlapping, and the fourth quartiles are overlapping. Right? Shift would mean that one of them did not overlap the other. Good job. That was very fast. Yeah, she is always very smart. Okay? All right? Looking at this data, is there a quartile shift between groups in this sample?
No.
These two overlap, these two overlap, these two overlap, these two overlap, these two overlap. So is there? Let's see. There you go. All right. So just see, there can't be a shift if they overlap. It has to literally be pushed past one or the other. Good. Okay. All right. Let's talk about writing the shift section. Okay. Now that you know what it looks like, and I'm going to assign you guys some Education Perfect so you can play with these a little bit. These are just drag and drop. So I think these are a little bit easier to use than in the book. You're going to learn how to write about it. Okay. So first, you're going to state the observed shift. There is a shift, a quartile shift, or a median shift. You need to provide numbers from the summary to back it up. One median is higher than the other. That's a shift, right? I need to know what the two medians are, as well as the what? The difference between them. Perfect. Yes, I would sit close to Amanda if I were you. All right, and context. It must be related in context. You must say, right, this means that penguins in Wellington are taller than penguins in wherever, right? And where? Antarctica. There you go. Okay? All right, put in the context. And make sure then, guys, remember that last part about if you want to get an excellence, you base everything on one thing. What?
Research.
Yes. You must see if that agrees with your research. Now, is everything you're going to find agree with your research? No. If it doesn't, you still need to refer back to it. This is slightly different than the research that I did, which said that blah, 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 right? 1 or 2. Remember, you always cite it if you mention your research. So don't forget those citations as you move forward. If you say something comes from your research, you need to cite it, right? Remember, this one's slightly different than the last one we did. Okay? All right. So here we go. Looking at these. Here's the median here. Here's the median there. Definite shift, isn't there? This one, the female is much bigger than the male. The median value for females is shifted to the right of the median value for males. If you don't have this paragraph, you do not have an inference paper, by the way. Hello? Okay. The median values for females is 4. This is 1.5 greater than the median values for males, which is 2.5. This means that the number of pens owned by females is greater than the median number of pens owned by males in this sample. Must talk about the fact that it's from a sample. All right? Now, the upper 2 quartiles of the data for females is greater than the lower 2 quartiles of the data for males. The median value is 4, which is 1 greater than UQ for males, which is 3. This means that 50% of the females own more pens than 75% of the males. Let's go back to the chart and see how you can see that's true. Right? Is this beyond this? Yep. Is this beyond this? Yes. Is this beyond this? No. So, ignore that. That means that we have a shift. It's right here. This one is bigger than this one, right? This is the upper quartile. And this is the upper quartile. And it's shifted to the right. It's shifted, isn't it? So, how much data is there down here? I'm sorry, this is the median, isn't it? I'm sorry. 75%. So the median here is bigger than 75% of all that data. That's where they're getting those numbers from. Right? Okay. Good. Don't make it hard on yourself. It's not difficult. Okay? My research backs these findings. I found evidence that girls tended to be more conscientious and organized when it comes to schooling. Reference. Right? This would suggest they own more pens, and so because they are prepared in case something goes wrong. All right? Everybody knows that girls are better, so yes. Okay, clearly. So look at how you might write this in your paper. The median value for females is shifted to the right of the median values, and then you give the number values, and then you tell what that means. Right? So here it is written in the paper. The upper 50% for females is above the lower 75% for males. Then you compare those things with numbers and what to say what that means, and then you refer back to your research. So there's always in these little written examples. Okay? I would copy and paste liberally. Is that driving you crazy, or are you just cold?
What?
Okay? All right, so you have some examples. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an assignment in Education Perfect. I think these assignments are a little easier to work with than the ones in the book, and because you can click on the answer. If your answer is not right, it will tell you why. Right? And it'll give you an example of what you should have done. So, let's assign this. Assign it as a task to... Do I have you guys in here? Yes, there you are. You betcha. Oh, y'all, I just demoted you?
You just demoted us to year 12.
I'm sorry. Well, you used to be year 12s when I knew you the first time. Let me try again. Yes, you can open your laptops now. Yes, you may. Now, I'm not going to assign the information parts. I'm only going to assign the parts where there's work for you to do, the drop-down ones that we looked at a few of those. So if you want to look at the information sections, you're going to have to just go back and look. Okay? All right. It also, ladies, listen, it also gives you 7 days to complete that. You need to complete it before we meet again. Try to, because, or shortly thereafter, because it doesn't do you any good to put it off forever. You can't listen to music while you study, I'm sorry. I understand, but you have to have a pass then. You have to go talk to somebody. You have to go talk to Miss Dustin. We got a special memo. No earbuds. That's an automatic detention from now on.
Why is Mr. Dustin going so happy about this?
I don't know. She's a very passionate woman.
About uniforms and phones.
I know. And remember, just an aside, remember I told you last time, I'm on that list of people who have not given any detentions. They care because that means they think I'm slacking, because they know that somewhere I have seen a student with a phone.
Oh my God, phone.
Need to do it. Yes.
And she's like, oh my God.
University credits? Oh, I teach it, but I don't remember what that is. Somebody in here will know. No? That's, yeah. Numeracy credits. What does that mean?
Is that like level 2 now? You've probably got it. I know.
It doesn't level 2, trump level 1 anyway.
Is it obviously I don't get it. It's like some other words. Yeah.
You should be able to. Nobody came in late, right? Everybody's accounted for? Yeah. Good. Huh? That's our thing, yeah. Oh, no. I assigned everything to y'all so that you can find it easily. Guys, and also remember, this is a specific assignment, But I put up everything that Education Perfect has about informal inference there, so that you can also go to those information sections and copy and paste those phrases, the way they word things, which is very, very good.
Oh my God, it's so long. How do I
So stupid. Oh well.
It's so long.
It's all right. So what did we end up doing then? We ended up talking about spread, yes? Shift. Thank you. Okay. And there's the assignment then. Do we meet tomorrow, you said? I don't have us down tomorrow. Oh, yeah, we meet first thing. Ew. Not if that bit. I just think the first thing is yuck. So what's the next topic? Yes? What now? The YouTube?
The UQ.
UQ. Upper quartile.
Oh, I knew that.
Yes, you did.